that she is on a retirement transition plan, and it's because she has the opportunity. She wants to do
just now, so I'm late, and I did it on a credit card. But I couldn't quite figure out everything. I made it $20 more for being late. And there was something allowed.
Yeah, she might have more time.
$15. Figure out what I owe.
So yeah, I'm glad I saw you today.
Yeah, this is good.
What did you think of the play? I thought it was incredible.
Oh, I thought it was great.
I thought I had to keep on going.
Okay.
Yeah. It was better than I would have thought. And I didn't see the movie. I should have seen the movie. Yeah.
Have a seat wherever you'd like.
I'm just gonna hang out for Nicole's
You
portion.
sure you don't want to stay for the whole thing?
Yeah, Hi, Sophie. Hi, how are you?
Is anyone else attending in the?
We may have two more board members, but that's it. You're welcome to attend in your office if you like.
I can attend.
Or you can stay here, whatever you would like.
All right. I'll stay here for now.
You're okay. Join the party.
All right.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday, December 1st, 2021 Board of Trustees committee meetings, as well as the full meeting with the Finger Lakes Community College. We're delighted to have you all here, and happy first day of December. Wow, this year has really flown by. We're going to turn it right over to Trustee George Cushman as chair of our Education and Planning Committee, and some exciting news to start with. So, Trustee Cushman, take it away.
Well, thank you, Chairman Martin, and we will we'll start by kicking off this meeting and calling it to order, the Education and Planning meeting, December 1st at 4:30 p.m. And we're extremely honored to have Coach Solomon and the entire women's volleyball team on board. Chairman Martin, do you care to comment?
Well, again, another incredible achievement, not only academically, but also obviously athletically. This is one of the highest success years in terms of our history of our college with regard to the women's team. So congratulations to all of them. And we'd like to certainly hear from Coach and maybe even some of the players, and rather than hear from us as trustees. So please take it away.
Trustee Martin, this is Carol. I'm going to have Samantha Boccacino introduce the team and the coaches.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for allowing us to come for a few minutes to recognize our student athletes and coaches. Everybody can hear me okay, right?
We can, yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So they're wearing their regional shirts. Great job, ladies, on the coordination there. So it was truly a remarkable year for this group of student athletes. Perfect. After kind of losing their season last year for the COVID pandemic, the team was able to keep their players involved and engaged, and that really helped them, gear up for the season. So when the fall came around, like every other team that was affected, they were just happy to get back on the court. So, and little did they know what was in store for them when they took the court in August for preseason. So this group started with 12 players, and they maintained their 12 players the entire season, not losing anyone to injuries. And during the regular season, like any team, they had their ups and downs. They made their adjustments to remain competitive in Region 3 and in the Mid-State Athletic Conference. So they beat the teams they were supposed to beat while continuing to improve against the top teams in the region. And one of the teams that they faced was Fulton Montgomery, and they played them early in the season, and they lost early, but little did they know they would see them again. And towards the end of the season, they had a key regional win against Monroe Community College, our local rival, which helped them earn a spot in the regional tournament. And I know prior to this win, and I remember talking to Coach Solomon about, different scenarios for seeding in the regional tournament and tiebreakers, and there was even kind of floated the idea of if they would get into the regional tournament, but they did. And the Lakers entered the regional tournament, the number 5 seed out of 8. And as we know, they left the regional tournament as regional champions. So, and during the championship game, the Lakers met their match again when they played Fulton Montgomery for the District A Regional Championship. And in come from behind fashion, the Lakers were down 24-18 in the 4th set against the Raiders, and they rallied back and fought off the game point 7 times in the set to take the 4 set eventually by 27-25, securing the regional championship. So this marked the first ever regional championship for volleyball in the history of the program. In addition, yes, perfect. The first ever national championship appearance for the program. So heading into the national tournament, the team was seeded 10 out of 12 teams, and it was an extraordinary accomplishment for these ladies just to make it this far. And one of the overall goals of the national tournament is to finish or exceed your seed. So in true Laker fashion, the team exceeded expectations yet again. And in the first round, they defeated the number 7 team, Raritan Valley, 3-1, earning them a finish in the Elite 8. In the second round, they played number 2 ranked Owens College, and they fought hard, but fell 3-0. Owens would advance to win their 3rd consecutive national championship. So overall, the team went 2-2 in the national tournament, and with the win over Rowan College of South Jersey, secured a 7th spot in the national tournament, jumping 3 spots ahead of their initial number 10 seed. So to the ladies on the call, you're one of the top 10 best volleyball teams in the entire country, and you earned it. So just want to introduce the team and the coaches, and ladies, maybe just a quick WebEx hi when I call your name. So from Baldwinsville, New York, Jenna Wallace. So from Hemlock, New York, Caitlin Marzek. From Canandaigua, New York, Una O'Brien. From Canandaigua, New York, Emma Sipos. From Macedon, New York, Brandy Morrison. From Palmyra, New York, Alyssa Johnson. From Canandaigua, New York, Emma O'Brien. From Gates, New York, Ashley Kreider. From Olean, New York, Hannah DeArmit. From Victor, New York, Kayla Fetchy. From Newark, New York, Megan Johnson. And from Lyons, New York, Alicia Morrison. And then I would just like to recognize our coaching staff as well who's on the call. So first is our assistant coach and FLCC alumna class of 2017, Maddie Joseph. And this is Maddie's first year as our assistant women's volleyball coach, but it's not her first time at FLCC. She played 1 year of volleyball for the Lakers after transferring in 2016 and earned Mid-State Athletic Conference honors and second team All-Region honors. And additionally, she played 2 years of softball at FLCC. So congratulations to Coach Joseph, and thank you for all your contributions as a former student athlete and now as a member of our coaching staff. And
Thank you.
Coach Solomon, as our head women's volleyball coach, who just concluded his 4th season for Finger Lakes. And under his helm, in 2018, the Lakers posted a 26-12 record and made their deepest run in the NJCAA Region 3 tournament at the time. And in 2019, the team was successful again in posting a 2015 record and again securing another NJCAA Region tournament appearance. In 2021, his career coaching record at FLCC improved to 66 wins and 35 losses, with additions of a regional championship and a national tournament appearance. So congratulations to Coach Solomon, Coach Joseph, and our team on a great run. And thank you for your dedication to our athletic program. Congratulations, ladies.
Very, very well done. Very well done. Now, the Division III NJCAA that's about 100 teams, right? And some of them are pretty big schools. Is that correct?
Yep, they range from all kinds of sizes.
Yes, I know one was my wife used to be at Prince George's down in Maryland, which is a huge school, 20,000. So we really giant slayers here.
So Trustee Cushman, could we give maybe Coach Solomon an opportunity just for a word as well, and maybe we could hear from him. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for recognizing us. It really was a historic run. When we sat at the beginning of the year, we didn't expect this. Like Sam said, we just were happy to be on the court playing. And as the season progressed, we definitely had our ups and downs. But what we did is we came together and we really peaked at just the right time. And you hear about teams doing that, and that's exactly what happened. We were beating teams. At first, we were beating the teams that were lesser than us, but by the end, we were beating the teams that were better than us. And it really was just an all-out effort where every person, we say at the beginning that it's, 6 people don't win a championship. The entire team did, and every person contributed in some way. And it really just all came together at just the right time. And honestly, I don't know if they are, but I can speak for myself that I'm still in shock a little bit over what happened. Like, even as we won regionals, we just sat there and I said to Maddie, I said, what just happened? It was such a big upset. No one in the gym thought we were going to pull it off, and we did. And then we went to nationals and pulled off that first round upset. And so we were really the Cinderella team of the whole tournament. Couple, things that happened today. I know the tournament ended a few weeks ago, but we're still feeling the effects of it. Today, we were just invited to a big tournament in Chicago by a top 10 nationally ranked team. So that's just being invited in honor because it's an invite-only tournament. And we also learned today that Brandy, one of our players, was named a first-team All-American and his first one in school history. So great things, from the season, but I think there's more great things to come. So thanks for your support. It's been a great honor representing Finger Lakes, and I think that we've really put it on the map as far as volleyball goes. I know that people are really recognizing. So thank you for your support.
So, Coach, when do you hoist that banner up in the Putmore Gymnasium?
But yeah, I can't wait. I mean, the walls, I gotta say, they're kind of bare, so we need to start putting banners up. And it's been 15 years since one's been hung, so we're ready to get that happening. And we're ordering championship rings, regional championship rings. We've worked on some drafts of that, and the girls are pretty excited about it. So we're gonna do a little ring ceremony and the banners and the whole deal. So like I said, we're not done celebrating and honoring this great season and the great team.
Wonderful. Chairman Martin, any final thoughts?
Yeah, again, 10, 20, 30 years from now, you'll look back at this, but you will always be known as the first. And in terms of the success that you've had, and we certainly look forward to future success, not only with each of you individually, but as a team as well. So we're delighted to honor you here, and Trustee Cushman, I'll turn it back.
Thank you. And thank you again to the team. We're very excited. You represented everything that I know Dr. and I always talked about through COVID, about perseverance and getting through everything. And you truly exemplified it. Well done. So moving on to, and this is the exciting part for all of you on the team. This is the real exciting part about the meeting. We get down to reviewing our minutes. So if you want to stay, by all means, but I wouldn't be hurt if you decided to do something better with your time. Thank you again. Moving on, the review of the November 23rd, the November 3rd, 2021 meeting. Does anyone have any changes, amendments, additions, deletions? Hearing none, we'll move on and accept those minutes. And moving on to the enrollment report, Dr. Urbatus.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to deliver a very short report, knowing that you will be reviewing the Fall 21 official or final fall enrollment report. So the numbers that were in your packet for fall enrollment reflected the November 5th enrollment report. As of November 26, overall total enrollment, headcount enrollment is now at has now decreased to 4.2% compared to the November 5th report of being down 3.8%. FTE is down 4.9%, a small change from the November 5th report of being down 4.1%. Gemini also had a change as of November 26. Headcount enrollment is up 1% and FTE is up 2%. Similarly, part-time enrollment has had a change. Part-time enrollment is up 0.9% and FTE is up 0.5%. So those were the most prominent changes over that 2-week period. Does anyone have any questions? So winter and spring enrollment will begin to be reported this Friday, December 3rd. So our January meeting, I will then focus on that enrollment, and we're putting fall to bed, so to speak, today.
Any questions for Dr. Urbatus? Thank you, Dr. Urbatus.
You're welcome.
And some old business from last month, Dr. Orloff to approve administrative appointment for Nicole Dugan.
Yes, thank you, Trustee Cushman. I am so very, very pleased to be recommending to all of you formally, and although I wish I could be there in person, she is there with those of you in person for Nicole Dugan's permanent administrative appointment as our data analyst. So I provided a formal memo on this, but just to talk a little bit about all of Nicole's wonderful contributions to our college. I think one of the things that we like to talk a lot about in APCI is our values and what is it that we're doing as a team, as a division, to live our values every day at in pursuit of our mission. And for me, Nicole really embodies the brilliant combination of inquiry and perseverance, because certainly inquiry is the name of the game in APCI. It is what we do, it's what we live, it's what we breathe. But we have to bring a lot of perseverance to that, to tell the story, to find the data, to work through it in often challenging environment and with a data infrastructure that is sometimes challenging to work through, that we're really working on getting better with. And so much of the improvements that you all have seen and will see here shortly again in a few minutes when I'm presenting to you, really the bulk of Nicole's work when we look at the enrollment report. And I'd invite, for those of you who have been on the board for a few years with me, to think back where we were 5 years ago when Nicole joined us. And we were a data poor environment, and we had we produced, I think, a 5-page enrollment report maybe once a year, and we didn't know the idea of data visualization. And it's Nicole's work and her diligence and really her perseverance at bringing and using Tableau as a tool, and also improving her own skills as she got to know our data and got to know our needs. One of the things that I wrote about in the memo to all of you was she is so keenly aware of how high stakes it is, the decisions that have to be made. These data are worked on in private, and she toils away endlessly in ways that many of us don't see, but she knows how incredibly important it is, and she puts so much effort into getting it right, in figuring out the anomaly, and in trying to make that visualization just a little bit clearer or tell a story in a new way. And we are a better institution for it, and I'm so proud to have her as a part of my team. The last thing I just want to mention is, as I think many of you are aware, Nicole is deaf, and she embodies for me why having a diverse workforce is so incredibly valuable and makes us a better institution. She challenges us on a regular basis to think about communication, to think about inclusivity, and really brings new questions to the table. That's what diversity does. That's what DEI does to a workforce. We don't ask the same questions because we have someone asking new questions. That makes us better, and I'm so grateful for it. So it is my absolute pleasure and honor to recommend to you Ms. Nicole Dugan for her permanent appointment at FLCC. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Orloff. I don't know if there's any questions. I think we certainly look forward to approving this appointment during the regular session.
I believe Nicole's in the room, and if she is, if you could just stand so we can recognize you and also see you for those of us who are too far away to see where you are.
Nicole says thank you so much.
George, I just wanted to mention, Trustee Cushman, that at the last board meeting, Nicole's formal resolution was passed.
That's right.
This was Dr. Ortloff's opportunity to discuss in more depth Nicole's role. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Penny.
So thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Orloff. And thank you, Nicole. Moving on to resolutions to be approved during the regular session. We'll start with Dr. Kaiser.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I have 12 faculty reappointments to discuss and recommend for your approval. We have 2 first reappointments. This is for Tomas and Michael Penn. We have our 1 second reappointment for Tiffany Leiden. She's a nursing faculty. We have 2 third-year appointments, or third reappointments, Jocelyn Bush and Beth McCabe. And then we have 5 faculty members for their 4th year reappointment, or their 4th reappointment. And that's John Bateman, Renee Campbell, Dr. Sean Connolly, Paula Knight, Carrie Kruger, and Jessica Brinza. And then we have a faculty member who the tenure team recommended for a 6th year reappointment. And that is Trina Brainsy. And I think what the tenure team recommended, and I support their recommendation, is that Trina spend a little bit more time working on classroom effectiveness. And I think this speaks to the rigor of our faculty and our institution around teaching and pedagogy. And I think it also speaks to Trina's openness and willingness to accept this recommendation. And she has accepted, she's working with a mentor around classroom management and teaching effectiveness. So I'm going to pause there and find out if there are any questions.
Any questions for Dr. Kaiser? You can move forward.
Great. And then I have 1 tenure approval or tenure recommendation for you tonight. And that's Dr. Rob Niger. He is our full-time chemistry faculty member. Dr. Niger is stellar at his work. And when I say that, I truly mean that. His tenure team was very impressed with him throughout the tenure process. They recommended he go up a year early, so he could have went up last year. But he chose not to because he was committed to several of the projects and teaching chemistry courses. He often takes on an overload. We have a hard time staffing chemistry courses, and he's always willing to take on extra courses, even at the last moment, and even if he's hadn't had the time to prepare, and he puts that time into it. Some things that we might not know about Dr. Niger: he holds a doctorate from MIT in organic chemistry. Dr. Niger could go just about anywhere with his career, and he chooses Finger Lakes Community College because he's committed to teaching community college students. And his pedagogy is very clear in his teaching evaluations and his classroom observations. Faculty are ranked on 8 different criteria, and each year by their tenure team based on these evaluations. And 1 being the lowest, 4 being the highest. Dr. Niger gets the highest rating in every category every year. He's really quite amazing. Some things I know about Dr. Niger, but not clearly enough because he spends a lot of time in the classroom with his department. He's got a wonderful dry personality, this sense of humor. And I was talking to his department chair, Jen Carney, about it today. And she said, you know, there are people that you're just so grateful that you know that they're going to be down the hallway from you for the rest of your career. Because faculty are durable, right? Administrators might come and go a little bit more often than faculty. But once a faculty makes a tenure appointment, they're typically there for the life of their career, or just about. And the Christmas before COVID, they had a white elephant holiday party. Dr. Niger brought everyone a gift. He didn't bring one gift in for everybody. He came in with a gift for everyone. And she was saying that that speaks to his generosity, both in his personal time and his professional time. So it's with this recommendation and all of this phenomenal work that I recommend Dr. Rob Niger for tenure. Any questions?
No questions? Well, that sounds like we have a great, chemistry wasn't one of my best subjects, but I can tell you it's great to have somebody of that with such a high recommendation from you, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to adjusting the Finger Lakes Community College Professional Service Positions roster, Ms. Palauchek.
Thank you, Trustee Cushman. In your packet, you have an additional resolution recommending the approval of 3 new position titles for the professional roster. 2 of them are in our Acts department, which has 2 vacancies. And these are new titles that will create promotional path opportunities for staff in that department. These are existing employee headcounts. They are included in the budget, and it's a retitling only of existing positions. The other title that we're recommending is the Assistant Director of Tutoring and Learning Support. And this full-time position will primarily focus on the Math Center, Writing Center, and Science Incubator. And this position as well is a retitling of an existing employee headcount and is included in the 21-22 operating budget. Are there any questions about these new titles?
Any questions? I think you've been very clear. You answered all the questions with the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And moving back to Dr. Ordloff for the strategic thought presentation. Dr. Ordloff, I hope you're full of energy because that was a lot to digest.
We like to keep you on your toes. I will try. I'm going to share my screen to put a PowerPoint up with some luck. So bear with me just one second while I do that.
You can see it, albeit there we go. So
I was trying to make it full screen just a second.
I'm tired.
There we go. Is that full screen for you now?
Close enough.
Okay. Ugh, why is it doing that? Okay. All right, we'll go with it like that. Okay, so hi everyone. It's that time of year again when we have lots and lots of new exciting data to talk about. And this go around, we're going to talk about some aspects of the enrollment report. In all of these, I'm really just going to hit a few highlights. And there is, as you know, and as Trustee Cushman mentioned, there's quite a lot of data. The strategic plan packet is itself meaty, and then the enrollment and retention metric packets that accompany what I'm sort of highlighting today that you received ahead of time. I'm going to hit some of our highlights and talk mostly about how this relates to some of the strategies that we've set out in our strategic plan. And we'll have some opportunities to dig into some of the data again in the future. As you know, I come back again to talk about the strategic plan several times, and there'll be some additional updates. Just as a reminder, there's sort of cyclical data that we can't update all the time, or there's certain things we can update in the spring, certain things we can update in the fall, and so forth. So we'll look at parts of that now, and we'll dig in further around the strategic plan again, going into the spring. So starting off with our fall enrollment report. So every year we conduct or complete the fall enrollment report, which primarily looks at fall to fall. So looking at ourselves last fall versus this fall. Now, traditionally, this has relied primarily on looking mostly at full-time students. And that is something that we've moved away from. As you heard in my earlier presentation, we were able to bring on a professional data analyst in Nicole. We've been expanding each year and looking at different cuts of students, and all in all disaggregating our data more to understand what our enrollment as well as our retention looks like for different student populations. So some of the highlights that I think are noteworthy around enrollment. Overall, as Dr. Abedes has reported to you on a monthly basis, our head count has been declining over the course of several years, and you do see that slight slope here in this graphic. But we're holding our own in comparison to the decline of enrollment that we see broadly in the sector of higher education, in the Northeast in particular, and since COVID in the community college sector even more in particular, right? Meaning we're sort of the most vulnerable type of school within the sector. But we're really holding our own pretty steadily. One trend that we note, and which I'll touch upon again here in just a second, is the difference between headcount versus FTE decline. And that's been pretty consistent now for a couple of years. And what that indicates is that we have the same or around the same number of students taking fewer classes. So that can mean a shift to part-time or even just a shift to fewer credits, but maintaining full-time status. And that is important to note. The difference between headcount and FTE is critical for two reasons. One, FTE is what our budget is based off of. It's how our state funding works, and it's how the state funding formula is calculated. And our CFO can wax poetic about that much more effectively than I can. But that doesn't change the physical or educational need of headcount. Right. So students coming to classes still need a parking place. They still need library books, and they still have to function even if they're taking fewer classes. So it doesn't always fully translate when you have a decline in FTE, especially when your headcount is not declining at the same rate. That can often indicate that you have students who are taking fewer classes but are still physically very engaged in your campus. So that's an important trend that we're beginning to see is holding, right? We're seeing that year over year now and not just 1 year. One caveat that I think I need to say here at the outset, rather than just on every slide, so we'll just sort of take it and hold it with us, is COVID is the major disruptor in all things, right? In all things in our lives, COVID has disrupted. It has, for sure, very significantly disrupted the higher education sector. We all know that. We've all been living that. But we need to really take that in when we're using data for decision making, because there's COVID written all over these data. We know that, but we don't fully know how or to what degree there will be a change as we come out of COVID, when we come out of COVID. So that makes this a volatile decision-making environment, and one where we have to look at our data carefully and remember not to necessarily jump to conclusions around those data. Trends we see even 2 years in right now are 2 years of pandemic data, right? So that's a really important thing that I just want to sort of make sure we all have in our heads as we're continuing on with that, with thinking about what these data can tell us. All right, so moving forward, as I mentioned, we're really holding our own in terms of our enrollment. And I think that's really quite impressive given the overall decline in the sector. And that's quite clear here in this visual. Right, we rank 3rd overall out of the 28 for which we have data when compared to other SUNY community colleges. The decline that we see in some of these other schools is really quite significant, and they collect, right, more towards that bottom half than they do towards the top half. Another key trend area that we see when we're looking at our enrollment data is around status and region. And this goes in part to what I was just talking about, that we still have a significant difference between full-time and part-time, meaning we have more full-time students than we have part-time students. But we are seeing that part-time students comprise a larger portion of the student body. And that shift is where we see that difference between FTE and headcount coming in. Now, one other trend that we're seeing here in these data that I think is really noteworthy and also helps understand where some of our staying power has come from is the growth of students from other New York State counties. And that's attributable primarily to the growth in SUNY Online, but also to the shifts in other course modalities, not just SUNY Online courses, but students taking more flexible course modalities and that working for them from a greater distance than it might have otherwise. So we see a growth in out of county or out of region students. And that includes some growth of out of state. That's primarily from SUNY Online, some moderate additional growth that we've seen also year over year, right? So 2 years in a row. And that's actually somewhat counter to some of the SUNY data, right? The SUNY wide, we're not necessarily seeing that. So we're outperforming when we consider the sort of whole SUNY network. So some highlights around student demographics. One is, and you've heard me say this now for a couple of years in a row, but it's a trend that's holding. Our student body is continuing to become more diverse. 22% of our students are students of color. That's pretty consistent. But overall, over the last 5 years, we're seeing an upwards trend in that number. And there's an increase year over year, steady increase this year, a 1% increase of our students who identify as Hispanic or Latino. And the same is true of our students who are older. So looking at the bottom of the slide, we have the enrollment of students under 24 has declined a bit, but above 34 has increased. And again, we're seeing that for the second year in a row. Now, some of that may be in part due to the pandemic, but I think what we're also seeing is they are taking advantage of both SUNY Online and other flexible modalities. So I wanted to mention those two particular points together, the growth of a more diverse student population and an older student population, because these were two key metrics in our strategic plan. both reaching out to the Hispanic population, to diverse student populations in general, and to older students. And what we see, and we'll talk about this in the strategic plan section of this presentation more specifically as it relates to that metric, but what we see is that sort of despite this major disruption of COVID, we're still having quite a bit of success in some of the areas of our strategic plan. So our strategy is still coming to bear. It may be coming to bear in ways that we didn't fully expect. And in some ways that COVID has helped us because we had already been looking at some of that flexibility and looking at flexible modality, and COVID has sort of helped us do some of that in ways we might not have been able to do otherwise. And these numbers are beginning to show a yield from that, showing that the strategy is paying off. So one other piece that comes into all of this is that student supports continue to grow. And these are just a couple of examples of this, but most particularly I wanted to highlight that we have 10% of students are registering as having a disability, and that number has continued to go up. And that's only students who are registering as having a very sort of particular academic disability and needing academic supports for that. But at the same time, we also know anecdotally, and we're beginning to get some numbers on this. So I hope that this will be something I can bring some numbers in the next time we talk, is at the same time a rise in mental health needs for our students. So that combined with the rising number of students with registered disabilities is just sort of another example of how, as our student body is shifting and changing, their needs are also shifting and changing. And we have to be cognizant of that with our decision making in order to translate that enrollment into student success. Okay, so one piece that I wanted to highlight here, although we did not do a sort of deep equity dive here, we did and always do disaggregate our data as much as possible so that we can use those data to start having equity conversations. And one item that really stands out in these data is the confluence of Pell status and race and ethnicity. So students of color make up 24% of the student body eligible for Pell consideration, but they receive 31% of the grant. So basically what that means is students of color are more likely to have high economic need. One of the things that higher education research tells us is that when we see intersectionality, that's where, meaning students have more than one area of need, that's where we really want to be thinking about what kinds of supports do we have in place in order for, again, translating this to student success, right? And I know Provost Kaiser in particular has been leading a lot of discussions around this, as well as, of course, all of the work of Dr. Sim Covington. So I think we're in a good place to be having these conversations. We're doing this work, but these numbers are indicative of why this work is so important, and why, in fact, the disaggregation of data is important for us to keep an eye on where we're going and what we're doing as we seek to serve a more diverse population. We need to diversify how we support those students. Okay, so just a couple of takeaways here. The pandemic has impacted enrollment demographics, and we're not even fully sure what that means yet, but it's an area we need to continue to look at as we work through these data and work through the data that we'll get in the spring as well as we enter year 2 of the pandemic. We are doing very well compared to our peer institutions, particularly around enrollment. And we need to continue to think through diversity, support services, decision-making as we continue to apply the strategies we set out in our strategic plan. And as we look towards that next strategic plan, what have we set ourselves up for, and what focus on student success do we need to bring to that conversation? So that's just a few takeaways from the enrollment report, which you have and can continue to look through and mark up. And if you have questions and want to talk about anything in particular, we can look at that together. And it will also provide data for us to continue to come back to for the conversations we have going forward in the spring. I want to move us towards looking at some of our strategic plan updates and some of the select student success metrics, which are, as you may recall, some of the metrics that the board identified as particularly important and we sort of attached to our regular strategy or strategic plan updates in order to continue to keep an eye on those metrics as well. And I'll just sort of remind everyone that some of these you have not seen since April 2020, and we update them cyclically based on what data are available. So we'll be looking at sort of the fall version of them and then we'll go back and look at some of the spring pieces in the spring, or towards the end of the spring. Just 1 second. I have a bit of a cold, so I apologize.
Dr. Orloff, one quick, if you could, just for the board's benefit, you mentioned disabled, and disabled really popped out throughout the entire, all the decks. Can you define what makes up disabled?
So in this case, it's a student who registers with our disability services. So they come in and self-identify as needing accommodation. They provide paperwork around that, and they work with Melissa Sewells in particular. She is our coordinator of disability services. That falls under our ASAP center. And Melissa works through the accommodations they'll need to be successful. So it is a narrow definition of disability, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to point out that we do know that that number is actually falsely low, right? We know that students in particular are telling us about growing mental health needs, and that's not necessarily captured in being able to register for academic services. Sometimes those things that overlap, but they don't always. And then there are also students who don't choose to self-identify, right? So it's a low number, but it's 10% of our student body, and we know it's falsely low.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so as I said, we're going to move forward to looking at some of the aspects of the strategic plan. I'll just remind everyone we have 6 objectives in our strategic plan, and I'll take you through each of those objectives and update you on where we are with them, given what data we have at this point in the semester. So our first objective is improve student retention and persistence. And this overall is probably one of the numbers we've seen the biggest COVID impact from. So overall, we saw a decline in retention, so opposite of the direction that we would ideally be wanting to go. This is in line with what we're seeing nationally. And some of that is also probably fully pandemic explainable. So we won't be able to fully tease out what do we need to make changes to in order to address that. But we will want to dig in and look at students that were not retaining fall to fall and see what types of interventions might be more successful. And overall, under objective 1, in addition to looking at fall to fall retention, we look at the completion rates, and we look at fall cohorts earning a degree. That's essentially like what we mean by completion. And we see an upwards trend in this. So that we are not always retaining from fall to fall, but we are overall, the students that we are retaining are completing their degree or certificate. It's not always a associate's degree. Sometimes it's a certificate at a higher rate, and that trend is going up. So that's a positive. This particular one relates to the strategic plan, but also is a modification based on some of the items that you all were particularly interested in. And that is looking at completion time, right? So I just talked to you overall about completion. Well, what does that mean for how long it takes students to complete? So we look at 100% completion, 150% completion, and 200% completion. And not too surprisingly, we see some moderate declines in the most recent completion timeframes, which are the most impacted by the pandemic. So this is one that we have to sort of follow through and see because it takes 3 to 4 years for us to actually get data on each of these cohorts. Okay, so oh, sorry, I moved us too fast. So some key takeaways around improving student retention and persistence. Course completions based on the percent of course credits completed was at an average on 71%. And I want to sort of call this out because that's actually on par with what we've seen for the last 6 years. We had the dip last fall when we were sort of more in the throes of the immediate pandemic. But what this really tells us is we had to pivot. There was a lot going on, and yet we adjusted. And by the spring, we were back where we needed to be. And I think that's really something to celebrate, both in terms of the quick work of our faculty and staff in supporting students in an entirely new environment, and to the resiliency of our students as well. So course completions by student status. So we look at first term completion of new and transfer students. And we saw some decline as was sort of indicated in the last slide in the fall of 2020. So as we go forward next fall, the question will be, have we recovered given what we've seen from the other metrics? I think we'll see that we're back where we need to go, but this is one of those metrics that we can't run the final numbers on yet. Okay, so moving on to objective number 2, meeting the needs of underserved populations. And this is overall one of the main metrics that I was referring to when we were talking about the enrollment report. We're really seeing some of the strategies that have been laid forward. And I think the work of the Strategic Enrollment Planning Committee needs to be called out here in particular, because they've really sort of taken on this objective in particular. And we're seeing some of that come to bear now as we move through the last few years. So year after year, we're seeing our older students very slightly increase, very slightly go up. Students of color enrollment has been consistent. And as I mentioned in the enrollment report section, we are seeing an increase in the number of Hispanic students, which is on target with that strategy. And here we see a little bit of more of a breakdown with underserved populations, some EOP students and students with disabilities where we see that slight increase. So in fall 2017, we were at 8.2%, and now we're at 10.4% with this sort of steady increase each year. Just to give you a little bit more detail. When we look at some of the employee makeup, which is part of our strategic plan, is diversifying both student and employee bases. We've been pretty consistent around our employees of color, so we haven't seen a lot of change in that area. And one of the areas that we have seen a huge amount of success in, and I think Provost Kaiser, and you've certainly heard from Todd Sloan, our Director of Workforce and Career Services, on multiple occasions, really have been spearheading all of this work. But this is something that wasn't necessarily happening, even though it was under our previous strategic plan as well. It was carried over in slightly different verbiage into this strategic plan because we're still really working on trying to make these connections between workforce areas and degree seeking areas. And now we're beginning to really see that coming steadily and consistently. Year over year, more programs are being developed. And that is also helping when we think about some of those older student populations, some of that is also coming from the students who are coming in to workforce and then staying for a degree. I think we'll see more of this as some of these programs, which are brand new or have just come online, really come into play. So objective number 4, improving the engagement and interaction between the college and community. We had a fairly significant dip in alumni engagement in this last year because of the lack of on-campus events. So I expect we'll see a rebound as we move towards having more events again. This in particular is really looking at coming to on-campus events, and there weren't very many held, so there was less to measure there. But we are continuing to see good things in overall participation in donations of alumni. Objective number 4 also looks at some of the applied learning aspects, right? The reason we look at applied learning in objective number 4 is the idea is our students are out in the community applying their learning, right? Doing internships, doing co-ops. Not too surprisingly, this is also an area that, particularly in the pandemic, we had a number of internships that were not able to go forward, but we have a good system in place, and that's already beginning to rebound, and those partnerships are still healthy. For the most part, most of them have now pivoted and are up and running again. This particular area on the looking at organizational sustainability, we have not reissued this survey, so we do not have new data on it. So we'll update this when we have new survey data. Looking at objective number 6 for improving environmental sustainability. So overall, we've done fairly well on this. So directionality is where we want it to go, but there are external environmental factors and increases in pricing that also make this a little bit less consistent in the great era of COVID. All right, so a couple of other key retention metrics. Again, key areas that you all identified as wanting us to dig in a little bit deeper and continue to track items as it relates to our overall strategy. So overall, our retention dipped, and we do continue to see that our students of color are retained at a lower rate than our white students. So that's an area we need to continue to work through, as we talked about with our Pell eligibility, as we have a more diverse student population. We really want to continue to look at what kinds of student success interventions are going to be the most helpful for that student population. Okay. This is not too surprisingly, but it is a particular metric that we track. Students who are matriculated are retained at much higher rates than students who are just not sure what they're doing and sort of taking a course or two. And one thing that I think is really key here to see, and one of the things that we're beginning to learn as we want to understand our retention better, is students from within our service area are retained at a higher rate than those from outside our service area. But I'll remind you of what I told you at the beginning of this presentation, which is one of the areas of growth for us in terms of enrollment are students from outside the service area. So we're getting growth outside the service area, but those students are at a higher risk of not being retained. So what do these data tell us? Again, they tell us, okay, you know, we have this changing demographic. What is it we need to do to meet that need? And it may look different than it looked a few years ago because the population itself looks different. And that's what's helpful about beginning to disaggregate some of these data. This is one point in particular that I think is actionable, and we can really sort of look at, okay, we're attracting more of these students. What does that mean? And how do we serve them better in order to retain them, knowing they're at a higher risk of not being retained? And we've already gone over some of the areas of race, but this is broken down more specifically. And again, this is one area that we need to continue to work on. And I think we're having these good equity conversations and beginning to look at it, coupled with some of the issues around modality and where students are located. That gives us some work that we can dig in on and think through the best way to serve those students in order to not only enroll them, but also continue to retain them and complete them, right? Have them graduate. Okay, so one thing that Dr. Nye brought up with me when we were talking about this presentation and talking also about future conversations, right? I always come in and give you a whole lot of data, but we often have time later on to come back and really dig in, you know, maybe at a retreat or another board meeting. And so one of the things he brought up was, you know, are these the right metrics? Are there other metrics that we want to be looking at? And what other metrics are out there? How are people looking at themselves? And the Aspen Institute, which all of us have been participating in some of the Aspen Institute work for guided pathways. And, you know, Aspen Institute is really a gold standard in community college performance and excellence. Here are some of their metrics that they use for making community colleges eligible for being recognized for distinction. Some of these things we looked at, in fact, I just gave you the data on. And some of them are things that we haven't necessarily looked at before. We haven't looked at in this conglomeration. Combining things like the low income service area share of students receiving a Pell Grant. So combining both looking at a student's demographic and their location and their economic status, right? That intersection, that may be, given some of the items that I just talked to you about, that may be something we really want to look at improving on. So I wanted to just throw these up here for you. As a sort of segue to the future conversations that I hope we'll be having about what these data that I presented you tell us about our strategy, about our next strategic plan, because believe it or not, we will be talking about that next strategic plan soon, and probably as soon as this summer, we'll start really in earnest talking about that. And I think that also means, you know, what is important to you, the board? What might something like looking at the Aspen Institute metrics mean for us, or could mean for us? So I think we can dig into that conversation going forward, but I thought it was a good way to end with not just more data, but what's next. As long as we're asking what's next and moving forward with asking that and answering that, I think we'll continue to be able to use data to make good and sound strategic decisions for the campus. So thank you, and I'm more than happy to answer questions on this, on the packets, or you can also, as I said, digest, and you know how to reach me.
Thank you, Dr. Orloff. Are there any questions from the board? And please speak up. I'm at a little disadvantage. I can only see a few folks on the screen.
So, Trustee Cushman, just a question. Dr. Orloff, you reference Aspen. I'm just curious. We have the cohort that we're in throughout the state. Do you find some differences in terms of other community college? You certainly made reference to some, but I'm curious if in fact some of what we're doing either might be unique or might be comparable to others.
I think that's a good question. And one where I'd love to be able to dig in a little bit more with some of our colleagues than we've sometimes had the opportunity to. I think that for the most part, many schools are at a similar place to us where they're adjusting based on this major disruption. And they're also beginning to try to look at data in new ways or pull things together that they hadn't necessarily looked at before in order to get new answers. So the co-learning and benchmarking is probably becoming even more important than it already was. One thing that I think we are ahead of the curve on, but need to really work on how we are tracking and understanding it. And that's something that I'm hoping that my area will be able to dig in a little bit more in the spring into to give us some models of how we might look at it. Is we're definitely on the cusp of leading in all things sort of online and high flex and flexible delivery, and that's really a very clear in whether we're with the Aspen Institute folks or I'm in a different meeting for some other item. We're simply doing a lot of it. People look to us to know how to do it, what to do it. You know, we're recognized as leaders. But in order to continue on that leadership route and do that well, I think we have to start really disaggregating some of those data around modality in ways that we haven't necessarily had to do before. And sometimes that's easy, right? Sometimes that's a click of the button and now we have a new pie chart or a new bar graph. And sometimes it's actually really not that easy, right? And we have to sort of dig in and figure out where to get the data from or what the data really mean. And with modality, some of that is true. Some of it's easy and some of it's really complicated. So one of the conversations that Nicole Dugan and I have been having, and Karen Fisher and I have been having, is how are we going to pull this together, and how are we going to start really understanding, well, what does course completion mean in high flex, but what high flex, right? Was it a student who attended most of the time in person? Was it a student who was online all of the time? Were they asynchronous? Were they synchronous? How often? We don't always fully even have access to those data points, right? So how do we track that? How do we pull that together? That's going to be really critical for keeping us as leaders and helping us adjust our student success model to really meet the needs of the students. So for us, I think that's the big challenge. And to answer your question, it's where I see us differentiated. It's what we're doing well, but we have to stay that way.
So if I could have a follow-up, Trustee Cushman, just shifting now to middle states. I'm curious in some of your early analysis if some of these successes that you've talked about have in fact been identified, recognized, acknowledged, accentuated in a way that middle states has really taken some notice, if you will. And if not, is there ways in which we can maybe bubble that to the top?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And yes, I think for the most part, we're telling a lot about what we've been working on, right? What we've been working hard at. And we've been working hard at flexibility in the classroom and offering other modalities and bringing in new technologies and assessing student learning in new ways. So we're definitely really emphasizing that quite a bit in our middle states self-study. I do think, and we recently got this advice. We met with some folks from Erie Community College who just had their self-study visit. And they were gracious enough to meet with our middle states executive team, met with their middle states executive team. And they, one of the things they said was, we didn't tell about COVID enough because we were so proud of, we sort of thought, well, we're not supposed to be telling about that. That's anomalous, right? That's not what we normally do. And they actually were asked to submit more information around, around telling their COVID story. And that was very instructive to us, but also helpful for us to realize, we talk a lot about the silver linings and things we've learned. We need to make sure that is part of the story we're telling in the self-study. So that's not quite there yet, but we're working on that part right now.
Thank you, Dr. Orloff. Very complete answers as usual. Thank you.
Other questions for Dr. Orloff? Please speak up. Not hearing any. Dr. Orloff, one little nugget came out of that retention report that you sent comparing us to other colleges. What's going on with Dutchess County? Does anybody know?
No, I have a few questions on some of the comparable data.
Right. I was wondering if it was an aberration or if they just found a silver bullet somehow.
Yeah. One of the things that happens after these data come out is as we start to see each other, we start asking, right? Well, what's behind that data? So between all of the cabinet members and myself, we may have more of an answer on that. We did find out, and this is not a silver bullet, but a different college we've actually excluded because their data was such an aberration that I thought it might be wonky, and Dr. Bates and I both independently confirmed that in fact the data were incorrect. So we've removed that school from the comparison. So sometimes that happens, but we haven't heard that about Dutchess yet. So
interesting. Well, thank you very much. We look forward to having those further conversations as you suggested. I, for one, am definitely looking forward to that. Regarding the Aspen, I think it's notable that our cohort that we're involved with, pretty much all the colleges have about one trustee and one president. We have one president and 4 trustees. So I think you're going to find that the trustees at Finger Lakes Community College are very interested in all of this and very much behind student success. So thank you.
Thank you all.
So if there's no further questions, any other items, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
George, this is Joan. I move we adjourn.
Thank you, Joan. Second?
Santa Abraham, I second.
Thank you, Santa. The vote, all in favor, say aye, or raise your hand. Thank you. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned, and Trustee Cass, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Trustee Cushman. I'd like to open the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting for December 1st. Ask if there's any additions or corrections to the minutes. Okay, there being none, Mr. Rathman. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trustee Cass. So my first update will be on the campus master plan. I do have several files to share throughout this presentation, so bear with me as I juggle them. So as you recall, several months ago, SUNY gave us the green light to access the funds that were put on hold due to the pandemic, and those funds were there to cover the cost of the campus master plan. The last one was done in 2014. The county also agreed to move forward with the project as they were covering the other half of the cost of this project. Now, Kathy Ahern and I, we've been working with Mr. Thomas Harvey, the Ontario County Planning Department, to get the project moving forward again. The first step was to review the request for proposal and ensure the scope of work was still relevant. That request for proposals was reviewed by the board as well, and we took those comments and incorporated them back into the RFP. Mr. Harvey is currently reviewing the final proposal, and we hope to have that completed shortly. The other step was to form a steering committee. The county recommended an 8-person steering committee. However, the Board of Trustees and Dr. Nye agreed a 12-member steering committee was more appropriate. On the screen are the members of that steering committee. We've strategically chose individuals from various stakeholders of the college. So that's the Board of Trustees, cabinet members, our Director of Facilities and Grounds, faculty representation, and a key member of the campus community that can provide vital expertise in an important area of the master plan, and that's our Director of Library Learning Resources. We still have, as you can see, a to be determined member of the board for there. So I know Dr. Nye will be working with you all to come to a decision on who that final representative should be. My second update is referring the fiscal year budget for 22-23. We have officially kicked off the budget build for that cycle. Earlier in November, the budget We released 2 memos to the college community. One was a staffing request. The other was for IT needs. Last week, the official budget call letter and budget workbook were posted to the intranet. Over the course of the next couple of months, departments will work with their appropriate cabinet members to build their budgets with final submissions due to the finance office on January 24th. My strategy for this build cycle is fiscally conservative. We have seen a consistent decline in enrollment over the past few years. However, exceptionally low compared to peer institutions, and thanks to Dr. Abatis and her team. And you also saw that in Dr. Ortloff's presentation just earlier. However, our expenses has continued to increase. These increases are due in a large part to contractual obligations and service contracts and benefits. Historically, over the last few years, our contractual obligations have increased by an average of 4%. And as we rely more on IT-related services, these increases will continue. And at the same time, we want to limit the increase of tuition and fees to maintain an affordable education that is key to our mission. Moving on to the October financial report. Share my screen again. So the first thing I want to point out is that this line right here should be 2021-22 operating budget. My apologies for that. I just caught that about 20 minutes ago. So first thing you'll notice is the change in format, and I had discussed this in earlier meetings. If you go back a couple years to previous Board of Trustees meetings, this may look familiar. There are a couple items that we've added back in. The first one is the applied fund balance, this line here. And this is just to show how much of the fund balance was used in this particular fiscal year. The second line is the Encumbrance Reserve. This line is to cover purchases that were made during the previous fiscal year, but have not been realized in the expense side at year end. And then the third one is the grant revenue line. This is just to give an idea of the numerous grants that we are awarded throughout the fiscal year and to be able to track the revenues against the budgets on those. So this report represents 16.7% as of October 30th. If you look at the expense side down here, we're roughly at 15.33%. So we are maintaining good fiscal standing so far this year to date. There are a few lines I'd like to highlight. The first one is tuition line. Last month, we had not realized any tuition in this line yet. We have since realized that tuition. You'll see there's $7.3 million in there, representing about 43% of that budget fiscal year to fiscal year date. As you know, majority of tuition and fees come in at 2 stages in the year, fall and spring. So even though those percentages are much higher than where we are in our fiscal position as a percent, we are on target for those revenue streams. On the expense side, if we look at this supply and expense line, got about $15 million in there. That is higher than what the initial budget had. And that is due to federal stimulus funds that were awarded to the college after this fiscal year budget was developed last year. So this number is higher and will be reflected in later reports as we move further into the fiscal year. We know our year-end budget will exceed the approved budget of $48 million, and that's due to this additional federal stimulus funds that we did receive. However, I'd like to hold off on submitting a budget resolution to adjust that until we are further into the fiscal year, ensuring that we capture any additional stimulus funds that may or may not come forward.
Adam, can I ask a quick question? This is Jeff.
Yeah.
Back under revenues, on the sponsor line item.
Yes.
Is that simply because, well, I guess the question is, what's the schedule for the receipt of the sponsor's contribution?
I can't answer that. I don't know when that has come in the past. And that's something that I can look into and get to you that.
Okay.
I'm not sure if they do it all in one payment or not, but that is something I can find out for you.
Okay, does anybody else remember? Obviously Adam doesn't have the history of it.
I think Christine Palace you just put it in the chat.
Oh, okay. Very good, thank you.
Christine. Thank you. And the last thing I want to point out in here is the grant activity. You will see that there's more grant expenses than there are revenues at this point. That is just due to the controller's office continuing to upload the grant activity into the system. We do only approve expenses that are approved on grant awards. So in the coming months, this will start to balance out more. On a stimulus update, stop sharing real quick. There hasn't been much activity in the stimulus expenses, but I do anticipate this changing next month or so as we begin to have weekly updates on the progress of these funded projects and initiatives. And finally, I'll have the final year-end report for fiscal year 2021 at the January meeting. It was a complex year with stimulus funds and a couple of budget resolutions, and we are working out some of the smaller discrepancies that we have been encountering as we finalize that report. And that concludes my financial report.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions?
Yes, this is Santa Abraham. I have a question. Well, more of a comment. Adam, I appreciate and like that report better than it was before. So thank you for making that change.
You're very welcome. I like it too.
Anyone else? Okay. The facilities update, Ms. Ahern.
Good evening. Adam, are you helping me out with the photos?
Yep, I'm sharing again. Give me a second.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
So for this evening, instead of just sharing verbally what's going on, especially in the nursing project, I took some photos on October 5th, and I just want to walk through that with you to give you an idea of the progress made. So the HoloLens, as everyone knows, this is near and dear to Professor Parker's heart. We ended up renovating a 4th floor. It used to be a conference room up on the 4th floor. And what we did to satisfy everything and working with Case Western, you'll notice that we have a pretty funky, if you will, carpeting down there. That is very strategic and designed by Professor Parker with Case Western input. And I will tell you, when we had that put down, we had to bring out a very large colored print so that the installers were able to put that in correctly. And she was very, very particular. And if you could look at some of those grays, they are not all the same color. Some are darker, and we ended up having to bring new gray colors in. And all of this ties in and how that HoloLens works and how it finds a data point, if you will, or a datum. On the first photo, you'll also see lockers, and those lockers have all of the HoloLens in there. We ordered that. My staff put that together, and we had to make some retrofit in order. She wanted a glass case so you could see the lens. Then in the back of it, we had to drill a hole so that the power and the data could go to the lens, and they were charging in that station proper. So we worked with the electrical contractor to make all of that work, and that was somewhat of a labor of love. She was very much appreciative of that. The other thing that's unique now with the HoloLens, you see all those monitors around the room. Right now, she only works with one monitor in the front of the classroom, and we ended up installing 6 of them. And she will be working during Christmas or winter break so that classes in the spring, each one of those monitors will have a group of students. I think it's like 6 that she'll be able to teach she'll have a larger population that she can teach, and they'll be able to focus a little bit more than trying to have 24 looking at one monitor. And then lastly, what we did was we ended up on the windows in that second photo on the right, we ended up putting in no light shades. We had some things in there that we kind of did, but they adhere to the sides so that there's no light coming in, because that has a huge effect on how the HoloLenses work. Next slide, please. Community standards. This is another part of the nursing project, and this was a renovation on the 3rd floor. That was the marketing area that they moved down to the 1st floor. So there was a lot of movement around, but on the photo on the left is the reception area. So the students will come in off the main hallway. There's a place to sit. There's a reception desk, if you see that in the back, allowing someone to come in and find out what the student needs, whether they have an appointment or not, and then we can have them wait and then go to the appropriate place. And that never really happened before. We had no place for the students to wait other than the hallway, which made it a little awkward. On the right, part of the renovation in the marketing area, there were 3 office cubicles. We used them so that the 3 cubicles are now part of the food cupboard. And the food cupboard before was kind of here and there and somewhat unorganized. So now they have utensils, they have a refrigerator with fresh food in it, along with dry goods, and then I think the other is clothing. So when the students come in, it's easy, they can find what they want, they kind of walk through, and it just makes everything a lot more comfortable for them. Next slide, please. This is the nurse. So in nursing, as you know, the first phase was a renovation of the existing nursing suite with the adjacent space, which was the massage therapy area. And one of the things that became very important was just having a really good flow. And this is me taking photos, so it is not my gig, but it was trying to give you a understanding. On the left is a hallway that you go down, there's offices, and then you go into the patient bay areas. On the right is a debriefing room, which they never had before. And this allows, once the students are working in the patient bays, they want to be able to come in and talk with them and have a private discussion and really, what can you do better? So this has a glass, as you see on the right. You can see in there, we have now installed the door, which we didn't have the door at that time because I think I shared with you, we were waiting 16 to 18 weeks for doors. But this was a really good tool for them to be able to talk to the students and spend some time with them. Next slide, please. One of the things that the nurses really wanted was the flex lab. So that's on the left, and what that allows, we have an instructional space in the flex lab that are connected in an open hallway. The student chairs are on casters, so they can roll them in and roll them out. They can either use it for instruction, as you see there's a monitor there, or it can be a hands-on. So instead of having all the students crowd in one patient bay, which becomes very small very quickly, they can roll those beds in, they can hook them up, and everything can be simulated for a patient bay. That gets, when I go in that space, which I'm in often just to make sure everything's okay, that is very, very active because the students can come in, they're all there. It's a really good teaching experience for them. And then on the right of that is your standard typical patient bed. And if you were to go up there, there are 2 beds with a curtain, very similar to what you would see in a hospital. And right now we have 10 or 12 of them. Of course, as we know, we'll double that capacity in the phase 2 when that's completed. Next slide, please. So this is getting up on the roof and trying to give you a concept. The steel was starting last month, and I think I talked about that. But down below, that's the poured 3rd floor where we're coming out from the existing nursing area. And then this is just the structure to start the 4th floor. Next slide, please. This is the stairs. If you all remember, there were a set of stairs that went down, and as we call it, the pit, we got rid of those. And this will be inside. So you will come into the lobby of the 4th floor. You'll be able to either take the elevator, and that elevator shaft is on the left photo, that the large concrete there, that's the elevator shaft, or you can walk down the stairs. And then on the right, obviously near and dear to my heart with my HVAC background, that we did install a dedicated air handling unit for the nursing space, which is wonderful for them. And of course that will take it, also is sized to take care of the addition. So we can give them their own environment as opposed to trying to tie it into an older system. Next slide. I think we have, yeah. So, and thank you, Adam, for getting that in there. I appreciate it. But this was as of yesterday, I believe. Some of that structure that we were looking at. So now we have progress happening on the 4th floor and the roofing in that structure. And quite frankly, the goal is to get that roofing structure done middle of December, and we're really trying to get that enclosed. And I think we talked about that last time as soon as we can. I think that is it. Adam? Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate you doing that because when I do it, it never works as well as I would like it to. So thank you. Any questions about the nursing project and the progress? Okay, perfect. Any other questions pertaining to facilities?
Thank you very much, Kathy. It's great seeing the pictures.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you. And I'll keep taking them. I think pictures are, as they say, worth 1,000 words. Thank you so much.
Adam, one more thing on there.
Yeah, just a quick operating funds transfer. This is to cover a vacancy in the IT department and to cover a contractual individual while they do the search. It's just moving salary line into a contractual line to pay for those services.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Can I have a motion to adjourn? A second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Cass. Appreciate that. We will take a 16-minute break and re-adjourn at 6:15 sharp. Thanks.
Sounds good.
And it was the best,
There you go.
best decision I ever made. Yeah, walking around.
All right, we're unmuted.
Seeing Tara.
Okay,
Nice.
Beautiful.
welcome back, everyone.
Never been there.
As we're settling in and so forth here. Welcome back to the Wednesday, December 1st, 2021 full Board of Trustees meeting for Finger Lakes Community College. We have a very streamlined and efficient agenda this evening. It will be, by all accounts, briefer than usual, but we're delighted that everyone's back, and we'll call to order the meeting here at 6:16 p.m. on Wednesday, December 1st. Any new business to bring in front of the board at this time from either trustees or folks that have joined us? Anyone at all? Hearing or seeing none. This is our community public comment portion of the meeting. We, the Board of Trustees, value input from members of our college community. We encourage your participation, and we ask that you please identify yourselves as you speak, and we would allow up to 5 minutes for comments, or at the discretion of the chair, a little bit longer. Thank you in advance for these comments, and would anyone like to share their thoughts and comments now with the board or the Board of Trustees? Anyone? Okay, hearing none or seeing none, we'll move to the two sections of our agenda for consent. We have a total of 5 items underneath the consent agenda, and with the trustees' permission, we'll take all 5 of those together. Please, a motion and a second. Identify yourself. A motion, please.
This is Jeff. I'll move it.
Thanks, Jeff. Second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Rich. Comments or questions? Hearing or seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carried. Thank you. Any old business? I have one that's not terribly old, and I'll just loop it right into my chair's report here. We certainly knew there was a statewide NYCCT conference recently held in Saratoga Springs, and thank you, Dr. Nye, and also thank you, Trustee Mihalik, for not only attending, but your direct involvement in this conference. And I'll say it for the benefit of this group, your fingerprints in a very good way were all over the conference, data and planning, as well as your leadership and facilitation, past and present. And Dr. Nye, with some of the comments that you made, and I'm not going to steal the thunder here, but one of the highest awards bestowed by the statewide trustees, not each and every year, but when appropriate, was also bestowed upon one of our good friends of the college. And Dr. Nye, maybe you might take an opportunity to maybe speak a little bit about that if you would, and what actually transpired.
Sure. The Sands family was awarded the highest recognition you can have for support of a community college based on their many, many years of contributions to this college and how much they care. That goes back to the legacy of the family for now going on to 3 generations of support that go back to the original family, to Rob and Richard Sands, who were recognized, to actually the relationship we have now with their children with the Lake House in terms of continuing that relationship and the amount of money that they provided. We provided a wonderful history and the connections that the family has to the actual award itself. And it was a really wonderful evening. We've been texting a little bit here, Donna Mahalik and myself and Steve, to get the pictures from the actual NYCCT dinner, so we can send that with the plaque along with the program that was provided. And actually, one of the plaques will go back up here. Now that we moved our plaques because of the big screen here to my right, we need to find a new place for the awards we've had from the NYCCT awardees in the past, which we'll do. But it was a wonderful evening. We're thankful to have the Sands family as such great benefactors to this college. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. And this next suggestion, I think came from you, Donna, with regard to, although the Sands were not physically able to be with us, they really did send along a a heartfelt thank you. I would describe it. Certainly not boilerplate by any means. It was really well constructed and well crafted. The opportunity as the weather improves and when we're back outdoors, maybe somehow connected to CMAC, and we might take an opportunity to acknowledge and recognize them in some way. So that's an idea that is floating out there and one that's cultivating some more support. So something to stay tuned to hear a little bit more about. And when we're together again in spring and summer to recognize them in person. So stay tuned for more there.
Chairman Martin, we have another great opportunity to really recognize them, and it will be probably even better than CMAC. We have a ribbon cutting coming probably sometime in June or July for the nursing expansion, which would be a perfect time.
Excellent idea. Sure. So it sounds like we have some choices there. That's terrific. That's great. Anything final, Rob or Donna? And I know Donna, you're listening in here tonight, but any comments, Rob, or anything final on that matter?
Not for me. I think no, not for me. Thank you.
Great. Okay, then we'll turn right to your president's report, Dr. Nye. Feel free.
Okay, I'm not going to speak a lot about the report. I did want to highlight a couple of things out of the report, though, and then I have two other things not in the report. First, we are, just so the board knows, because it is in terms of operations that support student success that we've talked about earlier tonight. That is that we'll be going through the process over the next year and a half of transferring over from our learning management system from Blackboard to D2L Brightspace. And so it's something that is an opportunity as well to create a different cultural activity, set of expectations here. And Jonathan, if you would like to just, if you want to take a moment, your thoughts on how we're transitioning to D2L Brightspace.
At my previous institution, I was involved in the procurement and transition from Blackboard to Brightspace D2L. So I've lived through this before, and it's actually much easier than you think. The reason that D2L is gaining market share in the LMS ecosystem is because they've made it so easy. If people remember when we went from Angel to Blackboard, there was probably some tension. D2L has made it much easier. So we are in the first cohort. SUNY is breaking this up into two cohorts. First cohort to transition, and then a second cohort. We signed up for the first one. Our utilization rates in Blackboard are high relative to our peers, largely because of our large asynchronous online learning and some of our projects. So we think just that general knowledge and that interest, we want to be in the first cohort. We will start with that transition in the spring. And already we have access to a sandbox environment where faculty could start playing around in that environment to understand how that looks, how that feels. And then they basically simply take their courses in Blackboard and then they migrate into D2L. They'll look different, the interface is different, but all the content migrates with them. And it's really a relatively short learning curve if it's anything like what I've lived through previously. So I'm not too worried about it.
Thanks, Jonathan. I also just wanted to highlight the stimulus funds. Adam spoke briefly about it, but there's two parts, and there's a lot of hard work going on by a lot of different people. You've had the grant aids for the students. And I just want to highlight the work that Carol Urbatis and her team have been doing in distributing out over $2 million this fall to the students this far, and we'll be doing it again this spring. And also within the institutional funds, one good piece of news that we have, shifting now from the student funds that Carol and her team are working hard on to what Adam mentioned, we have the ability to request an extension for an additional year from having the institutional funds expended by May 22nd, and we'll most likely do that. So it buys us some time to make sure we're doing some great work. And I expect to see a more detailed report next month in terms of what we're at, where we're at in terms of expending those funds to be provided to you by Adam. I wanted to highlight two things that are not on my report. First one is we had the State Department of Labor request to partner with us and house a DOL career center at the Newark campus. you start to think about that, that's really, really important. It's probably the way we need to go. It's the way that Carol keeps whispering in my ear loudly about how we need to transition the Newark campus. But if we can make this work, which I think we'd be able to do, you have P-Tech, you have a career center, you have education, and you have a major employer and several others, one of them right up on the hill, on Silver Hill there. So that's really important for us in terms of creating a synergy of what community colleges are supposed to be. So I'm really excited to see as Carol, Adam, and their folks work with the Department of Labor, and then that will really loop in Todd Sloan and workforce development in ways that really can do some great things for this college and our community partners in Newark. The other thing I just wanted to highlight, and I hate to say this, I'm going to say it in my report tonight, or my coronavirus update, that I was hoping after Thanksgiving I would change the name, but I don't think we're quite ready for that yet because of the ugly Omicron variant of the coronavirus that's out there. But I feel like we're in the movie The Godfather, and Al Pacino, when he says, "Just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in." Well, this coronavirus Omicron variant is pulling us back in. What's it mean to us right now? Not a lot yet, other than leaning forward in terms of what happens if we have higher levels of state emergencies. The state declared an emergency. Monroe County declared an emergency yesterday, and but it's not the emergency of a year and a half ago. It's measured. It's all about doing things like ensuring higher levels of mask wearing, higher levels of awareness of what levels of risk we as individuals, all of us, should take in terms of what the virus looks like right now, and then working with vaccinations and so forth. But that's it at this point in time. But it means we have to have a heightened level of awareness as we see what happens. The key that we've been told last week, the week before last, and we're going to get another briefing later this week from Thompson Health, is the same thing that Monroe County put out in terms of an emergency. It's the concern for the overcapacity, or I should call it undercapacity, that we'll have in our hospitals and healthcare systems right now that are already strained and are already full up in terms of ICUs all throughout this region. So it's just important we as board members and leaders understand that we're going to have to be vigilant to see as this thing continues, but it's not any time to overreact. We're not going to what we were before, but we don't know what we're heading into again, which means we just have to be vigilant and leaning forward. And that's my report. Thank you, Chairman Martin.
Okay, Dr. Nye, thank you. Any questions for Dr. Nye? Appreciate your verbal report as well as your written one. Let's move right to the committees and start out with our student trustee and trustee partial. Sophie, please.
Thank you, Trustee Martin. I'm not going to go through my whole written report, but I did want to highlight a couple of things. A couple of weeks ago, Dr. and I had a college council where he invited a bunch of students to come have breakfast with him, and it was hosted in Stage 14. I got to go to one of the meetings, and I talked to a lot of the students afterward, and they said it was a really great experience. They felt honored that they were invited, and I just want to say thank you, Dr. Nye. You really made an impact on the students. They felt honored that their opinion mattered, and the conversation took a bunch of different directions, and the students were able to share their opinions on how living in the suites went and a bunch of other things, so it went really well. And then one more thing that wasn't in here, on November 19th, the Student Veterans Organization wrapped up their fundraiser for the year, their annual fundraiser for Blue Star Mothers. They raised $1,000 in 306, and which is just amazing because during the pandemic, they were able to raise that much. It's more than last year and the year before. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, impressive.
And yeah, that was organized by Eamon Sweet. I just want to thank him. He did a really great job. They sat outside the student life office for an entire month, every single day for like 4 hours. And I walked by every single day. They're still sitting there. It was really amazing. So they did a great job. I just want to say thank you to them. And yeah, that pretty much wraps it up.
Thank you, Sophie. Any questions of Sophie? As you and the students look ahead to the new year, I know the semester is not done yet, but anything that you want to report with regard to as the semester starts in January, or any new initiatives that you're aware of that might be undertaken?
Nothing that I'm aware of right now. I can get back to you if I come up with anything. But
Certainly feel free to share as we move into our January meeting as well. So thank you all. And thank you, Sophie. Moving on to the Erm and Audit Committee, Trustee Astles.
Yes, thank you. The only thing to report is that, and I think a notice went out this afternoon, is that we'll have a joint meeting of the Finance Committee and the Audit and Risk Management Committee on the 31st of January at 2 o'clock, ostensibly to receive the audit report and the results from the last year. So we're looking forward to that in terms of what it tells us and what implications it has, if any, for the forthcoming year.
Good. Thank you, Jeff. Questions of Jeff? Okay. Board Development Committee. Santa, I understand you'll be giving the report this month.
Yes, I'm very happy to report that we do have one policy. It's the professional development policy is written. Unfortunately, because of timing of when we met, when the documents were due for today's meeting, we weren't able to put it into today's agenda. However, the first read will be in January. So we did complete our first policy. And then also another thing for next month to be aware of is we are going to be submitting a resolution for the Board Development Committee to become an official committee. So you'll see both of those next month. Any questions?
Questions? Okay. Trustee Cass, thanks for your written report on the association. What else might you add to that report?
Nothing to add to it other than I imagine there'll be a lot more in my report next month.
Okay. Always a very busy group. Boy, it's packed full, and it sounds like it's very efficiently run. How long are the meetings typically? 60, 90 minutes?
Yeah, around then. Yeah. Carol runs a good meeting.
Good. Well, thank you. Questions of Trustee Cass? Trustee Geis, the foundation.
I'd like to thank Louis and his team. Yesterday was the day of giving, and I see Louis put out an email that he surpassed his goal. Louis, thank you to you and your team. I would also like to report that I've already purchased my tickets for Vendors and Valentines at St. Patrick's Day. For those of you who don't get the joke, they've moved it to near St. Patrick's Day. And you can get them online. So you should we will be looking forward to that. And I'm hoping that we will be able to actually have it in person.
Chairman Martin, can I add one thing after Joan's done? I forgot.
Absolutely.
I'm
Yes,
done.
please.
Go ahead, Rob.
Well, it's based on what Joan reminded me, and I promised Louis I'd bring this up because the foundation this year had its highest amount of funding in any year in its history, higher than in 2010 when we had a capital campaign by about $80,000, and the foundation brought in more than $1.4 million, almost $1.5 million. Louis, I'm sorry I can't remember the exact dollar figure, but I do know that based on what you gave me, it's more than it was during the capital campaign by about $60,000 to $80,000, and it speaks volumes to the maturity of the foundation and the directions that it's going. And I just want to make sure that was recognized.
That's terrific. That's terrific. Louis, are you with us here on this call still, or did he have to?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Oh, anything else you'd like to add? Feel free, please.
No, I mean, thank you, Dr. Nye, and everyone. That number is the largest fundraising total in the school's history. We're all super proud of it. you know, and it takes a whole team, and we're like Dr. Nye said, we're growing every day to be able to hit these numbers. I will say this about the Giving Tuesday. What's important, you know, the big numbers are super exciting. We all love those, but it's iterative growth, right? So every time we do one of these, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And this year, even though it doesn't seem like a lot, but you know, last year 78 gifts, this year 105, and we, you know, every time we do a little more. So it's very steady, well-planned growth, but we all share in that success. So thank you.
Well, we love those trend lines. Those are terrific, and we really appreciate your leadership on this, Louis. Thanks very much. Our final committee report, Trustee Cushman, Student Corp.
We have to defer to Trustee Abraham because I was with you in Aspen at that time.
Ah, that's right. That's right. I did know that.
Anyone have any questions? I did submit a report. They continue to do a great job. They're very creative in the programs that they're doing for the students. And the turnout for the events is the highest it's ever been. So kudos to the whole organization.
Questions? Okay. Nice smiley face. Thank you, Donna. Appreciate that. Anything else to bring in front of the Board of Trustees? Penny, have we missed anything? Penny Hamilton, anything else that we've missed?
I didn't know if Donna wanted to talk about NYCCT further, or?
Yeah, actually, I gave that report as did Dr. Nye, kind of in the combination chairs and president's report, but thank you. We didn't mean to jump over that underneath committees. We kind of looped that up a little bit higher up, but thank you for that. Dr. Nye, anything else final from you?
Nothing from here, except it's been nice to have what you would call a normal meeting under unnormal circumstances and be done at 6:37.
So noted. So that's right. Please put that down in nice big bold print, 6:37. Happy holidays to everyone as we head into the season. No matter how or who you're with, you celebrate the holidays with. We're grateful for you, and I know we have a number of celebrations on and off campus as well. So remain well, be safe, and if we don't see you before the new year, we'll see you in the new year. So happy holidays, everyone.
Could we have a motion to adjourn?
You beat me to it. So please, a motion, please.
This is Jeff. I'll make it.
I'll
Okay,
second.
Jeff, thank you. Made by Jeff, seconded by Barb. All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
6:38 p.m. Have a good evening, folks.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Reappointments. Why did you do these reappointments will eventually become tenure?
Well, good luck finishing your
When you're on your
Thank you.
rest of the semester.